Good morning, everyone. My name is Brent Blair. I'm the director of the Institute for Theater and Social Change, and I'm the instructor for Theater 488, Theater in the Community, and the co-deviser, along with David Sloan and with my colleague Jocelyn Poe, of the combined Theater 48 and Policy 400 class called Performing Policy. Our focus this semester is going to be on restorative justice. I'm very sorry that I have to be recording this video for all of you. I'm on a plane to New York, or I'm in New York, I think, right now on Thursday. No, this is Tuesday, so yeah. I'm on a plane to New York. I don't even know what day it is. I'm pleased to offer a little oversight into the world that informs our work this semester. That world is called the methodology of theater of the oppressed. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. I just want to give you a general overview. I know that Jocelyn is here and she'll give you a much more specific overview of the course, but last year, Professor David Sloan and I collaborated to create this very unique, rare opportunity for theater students to combine with policy students to produce plays on relevant social issues of our time, particularly dealing with justice. And the third partner, it says theater and there's policy, and the third partner are community activists and organizers, people most proximate to the rupture that we are addressing with this work. So in our experience, the United States, as it mentions in the ad for this class, we have about 5% of the world's population, and we have about 25% of the world's incarcerated population. We incarcerate more people per capita than almost any other nation on earth. Despite our wealth and our riches and our privilege, we still incarcerate, and they're predominantly people of color, black and brown people, for sentences that are egregiously long. Up until a few years ago, with the passage of new legislation in California, we used to incarcerate many teenagers, 14, 15, 16-year-olds, for sentences of life in prison without the possibility of parole, for crimes that they have done that had very violent impact and obviously left some very grieving families behind. So it's a serious issue. However, our argument is that we don't entrust teenagers with weapons or with legal use of alcohol. We don't let them drive. We wouldn't let them fly a plane. However, if they commit a violent crime, we assume that they are somehow of sound mind and adult sound mind and body, and therefore they should receive adult sentences. So we have pushed back against those laws in California. I'm happy to say that there's alternatives. However, the system is still broken. What we're focusing on this semester is a sub-theme called restorative justice. This will go into greater detail what restorative justice means, but it's the idea of looking for alternatives other than either locking somebody up and throwing away the key for crimes that they've done. You do the crime, you do the time, or simply letting everybody off because we're just such kind-hearted people and we think everybody deserves a break. Neither of those are realistic options for obvious reasons. This is violent to people who have come from very challenging lives. This option of just letting everybody go is a violent option to people who've been victimized by the perpetrators. So there's a system called restorative justice that seeks a third path where the offenders and the victims work together and hopefully eventually collaboratively to try and find healing in the chaos of the crevasse of the great wrong that has been done. And then a new pathway forward that won't further locking people up for life or throwing away valuable life. You know, if a life is lost, it doesn't seem to make sense to take another life to replace that lost life. It's just two lives lost. So more on that later. The methodology that we practice the Institute for Theater and Social Change is known as Theater of the Oppressed. Look, I come with visuals. This is my students, my theater students' course manual for the semester. Theater of the Oppressed by Augusto Boal. Boal was a Brazilian practitioner, an actor, an activist, and he trained in theater. And then in the 70s, he started doing a lot of grassroots social change and some proper agitation propaganda theater, primarily dealing with the dislocated or disenfranchised Brazilian farmers and rural community whose land was taken from them by the dictatorship during the 60s and 70s. So, in light of that, Boal learned a lot of things about how things work and how things don't work. It's a complicated journey, but I'd like to offer some simple frame, if you don't mind. The model of traditional theater is that professional actors, I'm going to do hand puppets here, professional actors standing on a stage, to be or not to be, they tell stories that are written by professional playwrights, typically white males. That's just historically how it's been, at least in Greco-European tradition. These stories sometimes affect the lives of common people, that's my other finger, people like you and me, who may not be white males. They might be women of color, they might be queer people, trans people, they might be migrants, they might be people who speak different languages and have different religions. But the idea that Aristotle, who is the Greek philosopher who wrote the Poetics, on which most American theater is based, that idea is predicated on the notion that theater holds the mirror up to nature. So, what's wrong with that? The problem, I think, is who is holding the mirror, who's telling the story, whose idea of nature is it in the first place? There's so many problems wrapped up in that. So Boal's first chapter of this book, which I think only my students are going to read, but I'm hoping that all of you will take the time to look at it at some point on your own, is Aristotle's coercive system of tragedy. All right, what's coercive about Aristotle? Well, the idea that theater holds the mirror up to nature might leave out a lot of nature. If the playwright, like Sophocles, is the son of an arms manufacturer in Athens, which he was, and if Sophocles starts writing plays that glorify war, which he did quite frequently, then Sophocles has a vested interest in the cause of warfare. So he writes plays like Ajax and other plays that celebrate the lives of the warrior class. But the hierarchs of Athens benefit from that storytelling. The people, remember these fingers in front, the common people may or may not benefit from that storytelling. They're not the ones telling the story. Sophocles, son of the arms manufacturer, supported financially by the state of Athens, is telling the story. So at this point, a couple of prompts I might have for the students in this class to think about are, where around you do you see stories, including news media, including Facebook, social media, including television, live theater? Where do you see stories that you think are coercive, that are designed to kind of keep people in place? Where have you seen stories where people of color have been marginalized or fetishized or romanticized in some way from a white perspective? Where have you seen stories where women have been marginalized or romanticized or fetishized by men? And where have you seen stories where queer people, LGBTQ community, have been marginalized, romanticized, fetishized by straight people or heteronormative people writing plays? All of this is to say that I love professional theater. My training is in professional theater. However, professional theater has some limitations. When you're a storyteller and you're telling somebody else's story, you could completely miss the boat. You could misrepresent them. You could be producing a story that helps your people and doesn't help them. This is, by the way, I'm recording this on Monday, January 13th, simply about an hour after the nominations for the new Oscars have come out. I encourage all of you to just Google the hashtag OscarsSoWhite. I don't want to say much more about that except to say that this year's Oscar nominations are relatively monochromatic once again. Despite the lush diversity of storytelling that we have out there, especially on streaming media services like Hulu and Netflix. Nonetheless, Oscars have continued to be perpetually rather white. So, theater of the oppressed is, in Brazilian Portuguese, it's the singular oppressed, teatro do oprimido, theater of the single oppressed person. And it puts that single oppressed person's story front and center. So it makes that audience member the playwright. And the theater of the oppressed practitioner, like me, doesn't write the stories. I don't design the set. I don't say how it should be written or how it should be done. I help that person tell their own story. In a Marxist terminology, it is making accessible the means of production. So in car manufacturing, a socialist car manufacturing plant would make the workers, the owners of the plant, and would give them the means of production, and then they would reap their own profits, and they would be invested in it because they're making the cars and they're also making the profits, and there's a direct connection. Not the professional owner class who might make decisions to cut workers' salaries in order to augment their own paychecks. So theater of the oppressed is a pretty Marxist philosophy of art, which is to say the means of artistic production, how to write plays, how to act, how to stand up and deliver a story in a creative and engaging way. The means of production are bestowed upon the non-actors, the people. All right, let's take a breath. Hope I'm not talking too fast. Are you guys okay? All right. In my class, there's 13 or so dramatic arts students, and there's 37 or so of the policy students. None of you, I'm assuming, are maybe professional actors. You might be, and maybe I'll meet you later. But right now, I'm assuming that none of us are professional actors. However, none of us may be directly proximate to the experience of restorative justice. That could change. There may be some of you who have been incarcerated or have loved ones who are incarcerated. More will be revealed as we go through this semester. But to ensure that we have the most proximate engagement of the oppressed telling our story, we're partnering with an organization called Healing Dialogue and Action, run by my friend and colleague Javier Storing. Javier's an amazing former chaplain of Central Juvenile Hall. He's been an advocate for prison restoration and prison justice and prison reform for decades. We're joined by two gentlemen, Christian, who goes by Chris, and Tobias. These two gentlemen have direct experience, having both been on the side of a perpetrator committing a violent crime that has produced victims for which they have done decades worth of healing work and self-awareness work and lots of therapy and engagement with the victims' families. Now they're out of prison. They're working with Javier in this group called Healing Dialogue and Action to create opportunities of increased dialogue between prisoners and victims' families. And those two gentlemen will be our guests this entire semester. Their stories will form the spine of the new play that we're going to write together in this class. And we're going to use the methods of Theater of the Oppressed to write that play. So basically, together what this semester is going to look like is on Tuesdays, me and the dramatic arts students are going to be working within our own enclave with these two guests to create the theatrical story, to find the narrative that's most compelling, that's most personal, that really humanizes this issue, and also foregrounds the conflict, because there's no theater without conflict. The policy students will join my theater students every Thursday, just about every Thursday, in this really big room that you're all going to be together with on this coming Thursday. It's called the PED building, right across from track and field. It's a really big, spacious, well-lit, beautifully windowed room. And we'll all be up on our feet doing theater exercises and policy explorations in small working groups to write the best possible, most complex play we can, which will be performed in April at the Scene Doc Theater. The dates are set. It's the Monday and Tuesday evenings, the last week of April. I don't have my calendar with me, but it's in the syllabi. And all are expected to attend and to perform to the extent possible. I know this is throwing a lot at the policy students. Jocelyn will ease you into that conversation later on. Don't be scared if you're scared of performance. There's lots of room, lots of places for you to get involved that don't involve you just standing up and doing a Shakespearean monologue or singing and dancing. But if you do sing and dance, we'll probably invite you to get involved. Having said that, these two guests, Chris and Tobias, will join us. They'll create content. We will develop it, make it rigorously strong, policy-specific, policy-savvy, that we will perform in April for a collective community of stakeholders, including some USC students, a lot of people from the prison industrial complex, people who are like formerly incarcerated themselves or have loved ones who are incarcerated. This will be our journey together. And lastly, what I want you to know about Theater of the Oppressed, and I know I'm over my 15 minutes. Sorry, Jocelyn. I'm 17 minutes and 12 seconds, I can see. I'll be done in like a minute and a half. The last component of Theater of the Oppressed is that once the oppressed come up on stage to become actors, they create scenes between protagonists, people who have a desire, and antagonists, probably played by my students in the Theater 488 class, right? So my students will probably be playing protagonists. The policy students will be engaged wherever they can. We have some interstitials like commercials in between. That's probably where we will put a lot of the policy students in performance mode. But these scenes are called anti-models. These are models of how things should not be. So we'll show a scene between a protagonist who has a desire for, let's say, restorative justice to be implemented in prison, and an antagonist, let's say maybe it's a prison warden who has an anti-desire. He does not want restorative justice, or it could be a victim's family. And then we see them battle argumentatively and philosophically with action, each side of their content. The antagonists will always win in our plays. Because it's theater of the oppressed, we have to show real life as it's happening. We're focusing on events that are not succeeding right now. We're only choosing stories where there has so far not been success. So we'll create anti-model scenes where the antagonists will constantly win. And then at the end of the night, at the end of our play, we'll turn the house lights on. We'll ask the audience, did they understand the play? Does this happen in real life? And do they like what happened to the protagonist? Hopefully they'll say yes to the first two and no to the third. If they don't like what happened to the protagonist, audience members themselves will get up on stage and play that protagonist against this antagonist to improvise different strategies to make this event successful. And in doing so, we turn this whole theater space into a forum. That's why it's called forum theater. It's a forum. It's not a play. It's not a performance of art. It's a performance of liberation. Art is the language. Theater is the language. But theater is not the end all, the be all. This forum puts audience members up in the actors' seats. It turns them from spectators to spect actors. And we're going to end with a really rousing, very engaged. I promise you, in my 30 years of doing this work, that's always the most exciting part of our performances, are the engagements from the audience members. So we're going to turn this into a really engaged event. Audience members will be at play. The stakeholders will be trying their best to get across the argument, which we all agree we need, and that's based on our research and our lots of work in this class of readings. You'll be reading Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow. All of us are going to be reading that book together. It's a phenomenal book. And then my students will be reading Theater of the Oppressed. Whew. Okay, there's my, now 20 minutes. So there I've gone over 5 minutes. I wish you all well. I'm sorry I can't be there this week. Thursday, please arrive on time, early if you can, to PED 207. There will be 50 of you, so we'll have to arrange chairs and set up a place where Javier and Christian and Tobias can speak and be heard by everybody with some questions and answers afterwards. Well, last thing I can think of is just dive in with your passions this semester. All of us are actors, even if we don't know it. So don't be scared by the idea of performance. We're all performing. The sad thing is if we're performing narratives that are written by dominant culture, and we don't even know about it. If women are performing narratives that they think men want them to be, and they don't even know about it. If queer people like myself are performing narratives that they think heteronormative culture wants us to perform, and we're not aware of it, that's a tragedy. So let's turn this into a comedy and choose our own narratives, make choices. And as my mentor, Auguste Boal, used to say, we're not human beings, we are humans becoming. Have a great class. I'm excited to work with you. I'm available through email. That's bblair@usc.edu, even this week. If any of you have immediate questions or concerns, please email me right away. Otherwise, Jocelyn, thank you so much for hosting this now 22-minute video. And I look forward to working with you the following week when I return after Martin Luther King Day. Take care. Bye-bye.